Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. I'm Leah Zalams, and I am hosting a series of interviews with women of significance in STEM. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Jerrica Dodd, Dr. Jerrica Dodd from Atlanta in the US. And Jerrica has a doctorate and 2 masters, originally in pharmacy and now a entrepreneur. We're going to explore into Jerrica's story today and hear how she has utilized this technical education and is really creating a life and a business that is fulfilling her and the people she serves. Welcome today, Jerrica.
Well, thank you, Leah. So nice to meet you, and thank you for having me.
Yes, so let's start off by hearing a little bit in your words about what you do and how you serve today.
Well, I am a pharmacist of 22 years as of the recording of this interview, and I spent 17 of those 22 years in the pharmaceutical industry. I served as a medical science liaison for 15 of those 17 years, and then I also spent time prior to that in global medical information. And subsequently, I left the pharmaceutical industry in 2018 for full-time entrepreneurship because I was having health challenges that I needed to step away and make my health my primary focus. And entrepreneurship was the direction that I've gone. And now we're coming up on 2 years since I left the industry, but I have just been amazed at my journey. And one of the quotes that I often use on my social media platforms is, "You would be amazed at what a woman pharmacist can create."
So you would be amazed at what a woman pharmacist could create, and not just a woman pharmacist, but someone who had turned lemons into lemonade. Because
Yes.
often when we're faced with health challenges, the natural response is to hide, is to, or it is that it takes all of your energy to
Yes.
deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And entrepreneurship is no easy option.
No.
So tell us a little bit about what that entrepreneurship is now.
Well, my business is called Your Pharmacy Advocate, and actually I provide wellness consulting services for patients who are wanting to get the outcomes and the results that they want with their health that they haven't been able to get up until this point. And the way that I started Your Pharmacy Advocate was really a bit of a personal journey. I had the fortune and misfortune, if you will, fortune and misfortune of walking alongside my parents. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. He is a Vietnam veteran. And 5 short months later, my mother had triple bypass heart surgery, from which she came from that surgery with a dementia, is the best way that I can describe it, that lasted for about 2 years. But in the midst of being an advocate for both of my parents, because I'm the healthcare practitioner in the family, 5 months after my mother's surgery, I had brain surgery. And I found myself being an advocate for myself from my hospital bed with my hospital gown on, asking pharmacy-related questions, not necessarily because my care was poor, not at all, but I'm a pharmacist, and so I could have a different dialogue with the nurses and physicians than a patient, an average patient would be able to. And so I remember saying that after having those experiences, my own experience, walking alongside my parents, that I was going to build something that helped patients. And that was where Your Pharmacy Advocate, the consulting service, came from.
Well, firstly, my goodness, they say things come in threes, but you sure got the doozy lottery ticket
Yes.
there, didn't you?
Yes, yes.
Oh my goodness, Jerrica. And you know, so not only were you the strength and the person holding your family together, and then you had your own journey
Yes.
to keep yourself together. And so what you know, apart from the challenges of the illnesses themselves, what was the problem that you saw, or that you was not being I guess that you weren't satisfied with the advice and the care you were being given from the medical professionals and pharmacy yourselves?
Well, what I felt and what I experienced in advocating for my parents as well as myself is that oftentimes patients don't know what questions to ask. We, in the United States, we have a very patriarchal medical system, if you will. And so oftentimes I feel that patients show up and say, well, whatever the doctor says. They don't ask questions. They don't know what questions to ask. And I really feel that sometimes they truly don't understand their medications. They don't understand what's going on with their health. And they don't necessarily feel empowered to even have the dialogue. So therefore, they become more passive in the conversation about their health and just say, well, whatever the doctor says, whatever I'm told to do. And I felt that it was very important for me to be there to ask the questions that I knew my mother could not ask, because as I described, she emerged from that surgery in a very demented state that lasted for quite a while. She couldn't speak for herself. My father, on the other hand, did not know the questions to ask. It was like, I remember getting that diagnosis the Friday before Father's Day that year, and it was like almost like someone had socked him in the stomach, if you will. It was totally a blow to him. So when a patient is having that kind of situation or experience and they don't know what to ask, I think it's very difficult to even find the words. And I wanted to be the one, as an advocate, obviously for my parents, but for other patients, to be able to help prepare them for conversations with their healthcare team, help ask the questions that they didn't even know that they had or that they should ask. Not that the healthcare team that they're working with is bad or anything like that, but I think that patients need to be an active part of their healthcare. And so I believe that each of us, as long as we have the mental capacity, need to be the CEO of our health. And it's not the responsibility of our doctors, it's not the responsibility of our spouse, and it's not the responsibility of our adult children, should we have them. Our health is our responsibility.
Yeah, and we can know that, you know, logically, can't we? But without the background, as you say, and so much that we take for granted, because you know, my original degree was in medical science as well, and so and medical health has been my corporate career as well. So we take that for granted. And
Yes.
it's very similar situation here in Australia as well. I mean, we have a lot of, you know, like pharmacy shops, you know, in the high street,
Mm-hmm.
and the staff are very helpful. But again, then their knowledge is really about reading what's on the label of the box as well, in a lot of instances, because and so, but I'm curious too then, to your business model, Jerrica, in terms of who contracts you to advocate for the patients? Is it the families, or are you part of the healthcare team as that voice, translator, if you like, between the healthcare team and the patient? That's what I'm hearing you do. Am I understanding correctly?
You are, and we have the capability of serving in both capacities. So the patient or their caregiver, if the patient is able to contract with us directly to take care of that patient. And in that regard, we provide education and communication for the patient to be able to have the conversations, or the caregiver have the conversations with the practitioner. If the patient or caregiver still don't feel that they are able to do that, then our pharmacist can definitely have a conversation with the healthcare practitioner on that patient's behalf if the patient authorizes us to do so. And we have the capability of working with a physician, if you will, who either has identified patients that they think would have an expanded benefit of care in working with a pharmacist directly, or we can consult the physician. Maybe the physician has several cases and would like to have a pharmacist consult them on, medication therapy, or, different questions that they may have regarding the medications of that patient. We're able to provide, if you will, a peer-to-peer consultation for that physician, in that we don't have to interact with the patient if the physician wants to contract us directly.
Wow, that sounds like such a valuable service and such a valuable time saver for the physician as well.
Yes.
And not to mention duty of care. I would think
Yes.
that would be a huge value add to any physician. So how do you go about? How do people know about you? Have you crafted this as a niche for yourself, or is this something that is a lot of pharmacists are doing as well?
So my specific model, I'm not sure how many pharmacists are doing that, but the third arm of the model that I've created has been to be a support for pharmacists. So as we acquire patients, the goal that I have for your pharmacy advocate is to be able to contract with pharmacists who have their own consulting businesses, and to offer them the opportunity to care for patients under the name of your pharmacy advocate, where the contract with that consultant, or that pharmacist consultant, if you will, is a B2B, a business to business, and we provide the patient for them to contract. Oftentimes pharmacists are a bit more introverted, if you will, and not all of them, but they may not want to necessarily be a part of the marketing and the sales that go along with arranging those contracts. And so for that pharmacist that is looking to have patients to care for, not necessarily looking for the meetings where the contracts or what have you are being decided upon, that's the model that I've built, such that it provides them an opportunity. Because pharmacists are in my opinion, and I think there's definitely been data to show that pharmacists can be and are an integral part of the healthcare team, and can be very beneficial in helping patients with adherence and compliance to medication regimens, helping to identify drug interactions. Oftentimes, patients will be prescribed a drug, and this, I think, is especially apparent in seniors, in the senior populations. They're prescribed a drug, and then they go to another practitioner for another reason, prescribed another drug. We could potentially have an interaction. We could be having side effects. We could be having side effects that now we have another drug added to take care of the side effects from either drug 1 or drug 2. And so we end up being in a large loop that can go on for a long time. And so it's very important to have someone who has their eyes on that with regard to even the opioid epidemic that you hear about, here in the States. I believe that a pharmacist can definitely be very impactful in identifying if even a particular medication is even genetically the right choice for a patient. So there are many ways that pharmacists can intervene. And so like I said, seeing that in my personal journey with my parents and them needing an advocate, my thought is that pharmacists are definitely have a place as advocates for patient care.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. But as I listen to you, I hear so many parallels, where, yes, it's like you know, the reason someone will go and study science or pharmacy or medicine is to become proficient in a technical way, not necessarily. Yes, they want to help people and work with people, but the specialty is the technical nature of the study. And
Yes.
so the business aspect, the sales and marketing, or even to put themselves forward and advocate for themselves, is not necessarily a natural part of their personality, but it oozes from you, Jerrica. Like you have that, yeah, very charismatic and obviously an incredibly articulate communicator as well. Like I'd imagine that you would also do public speaking and
Yes.
sharing your message, and because this is where that is something that I would imagine you would enjoy doing as well, because you have that aspect to your personality as well as the technical aspect. So, and I think that is where I see there is a big gap in a lot of women in the science and technical world, where if they don't naturally self-advocate, let's say, they don't naturally put themselves forward or say, pick me, or I've got something to say, and what I've got to say matters. Has this been a natural part of you or something that you learned? Because this is something that this, you know, the schools of thought around how much of us are we born with this natural kind of tendency to want to talk and want to actually get our message across, as opposed to, I'm curious.
So I would say that it's been a part of me, but I posted on social media several weeks ago that I'm very much a proponent of building your own table, because for so many years, I had to bring my own chair and then justify my worthiness for being able to sit at someone else's table. And so what you've heard me describe thus far is a result of me building my own table, saying this is what I see in the world needs to happen. And it's been a bit of an evolution, if you will, because I remember when I first started Your Pharmacy Advocate, I didn't necessarily want anyone to know that I was the founder and the CEO. I was like, that's not important. But I've come to definitely understand that people buy from people, not from websites or physical stores, if you would. People buy from people. And so as I started learning the lesson that I had to speak up, I had to take a stand, I had to have to say what my position is. I had to tell my story, which is what you heard me share a bit of earlier in our conversation. Because when you start to do that, number one, it gives other people the permission to do the same. And then two, it helps people identify with what it is that you're offering, and they go, oh my gosh, I need that. I never knew I needed a pharmacist. So oftentimes when I'm speaking, I'll say, I bet you've never spoken with a pharmacist at length beyond picking up your prescription. Have you ever had a conversation with a pharmacist about your health? And that's to make people stop and go, I haven't. I've never had a pharmacist. I should find a pharmacist who I can sit down and have a conversation with. And that's where Your Pharmacy Advocate has the ability to do that. And what I notice is that when I am speaking, because I do travel and I do speak, when I am speaking, I will have people who in under 5 minutes of meeting me really don't know me other than I'm a pharmacist, begin to tell me what I call their medication story. They will tell me about, well, let me tell you what medicine I was on. Let me tell you, my daughter was in a car accident and she was given opioids and it didn't help the pain. People just begin to tell me their medication stories, either good or bad. And it amazes me. And so I feel again that yes, pharmacists bring that technical part to the equation, but there's a trust with pharmacists. And like I said, this is not to negate any other healthcare practitioner's place in a healthcare system, I advocate that there's definitely a place for pharmacists, and pharmacists have a way of engendering trust with patients. I can tell, a patient will tell me that they are not compliant with their medication before they will tell their physician, because patients go to the physician and they want to be seen as good, as I'm doing everything you told me to do. But I've talked to patients and I said, okay, are you taking it like it's prescribed? Well, I only take 2 instead of 3. But when they go to the practitioner's office and the practitioner says, are you taking your medication? They said, yes. They don't get down to the, well, I'm only taking 2 instead of 3. So
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, pharmacists engender trust.
Because it's interesting, as I was thinking, you know, how the blood pressure, often you could the white coat syndrome,
Yes.
you know, as soon as you sit in the doctor's office,
yes.
you know, your blood pressure goes up. But pharmacists also wear the white coat. So it's interesting, again, yes, just how, you know, we as humans respond to different different personas. So I'm curious then, in terms of what sort of challenges, business-wise or you know, or otherwise, that you have found in setting up your business once you decide, because you've left the corporate salary effectively, and now are self-generate. That is a really big fork in the road, Jerrica.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that I also have another quote that says, they taught us to be pharmacists, not how to build a brand and not how to market. They taught us to be pharmacists, not how to build a brand. They taught us to be pharmacists, not how to market. And I believe that that's because you know, we can't be in pharmacy school forever. So everything's not going to be learned, which is why I'm such an advocate of continuous learning. And the challenge for me has been taking that technical piece of what I know to do and how to operate as a pharmacist and respecting that, but also respecting that when I started in business, I didn't know much. And I'm open saying I have a 22-year career as a pharmacist. I don't have a 22-year career as a business owner. So I'm learning every day, because there are lots of lessons to learn, if you can imagine, before I get to say I've been in business 22 years, or you know, I've been a business owner for 22 years. So learning how to operate and run a business, it's been very educational for me, because oftentimes when we have that technical knowledge and expertise, we show up and we're ready to do what I consider fulfillment. We're fulfilling the orders, we're fulfilling the patient needs. However, there's a marketing and sales piece that has to be acknowledged, or there will be no fulfillment to provide. And oftentimes I feel that that's where pharmacists show up and say, okay, I'm ready to do what I know to do. And there's so much else to learn with regard to business.
There certainly is, and I'm curious to hear your perspective. So 2018, so 2 years you've been on the entrepreneur road. So what have you found have been the things you've needed to learn, and how have you learnt them? Like, you know, what's been your entrepreneur school curriculum, if you like?
So when you,
I love it when you've had formal education, like, we get it, right? We get the grind of university, and there's a certain, I don't know, there's definitely, you know, one process, one way to get through, right? And it's very clear about what that is. But entrepreneur land, my goodness, I'm curious to see how you've navigated that and what you have found to be your entrepreneur curriculum, if you like.
Well, when you first were stating that question, I smiled, because the first thought that came to mind was through the school of hard knocks. When you say, well, how have you learned? I've learned by what not to do, because I did what I shouldn't have done, and go, oh, no, that's not the way. But honestly, one of the things that I've learned is that I came from the corporate environment, if you will, because I was in the pharmaceutical industry. And when I first began building my business, I was building my business according to the model that I had been used to seeing. So in a corporate environment, you have an HR department, you have an IT department, you have a PR department, you have all these different departments. However, that wasn't really very prudent for me as an entrepreneur. Number one, because it can be very costly. And then number two, it's very important, in my opinion, to be able to understand my business before I start assigning or hiring other people to handle particular functions, is that I need to understand how everything operates. And I found out really quickly that I didn't understand what a lot of things that were operating. And so to not understand what you are in charge of is a bit of a challenge. And so that was one of the first lessons that I learned. And I'm grateful that I learned it early, because now when I decide that I need to outsource something or have someone take on a particular task, I have a better idea of what it is that I need, so that I can have a better idea of what I should expect and a better idea of how to even communicate that, instead of saying, here, this needs to be done, take care of that for me, and not truly have an understanding. That was one of the
But how did you learn that? Did you go to school? Did you do a course? Did you get a coach? Like if someone said to you, hey, you know, I want to follow in your footsteps, what do I do? What would be your advice to them?
I learned that by having a coach. And one of the things that I decided was having a coach has allowed me to progress a lot faster than when I didn't have a coach. And I use the analogy when I'm speaking with women pharmacists and just pharmacists in general, if you will. And I say, we would have never had an idea to go to the bookstore and buy an organic chemistry book and sit at home and say, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to teach myself and figure this out. We never would have done that. Yet we showed up at the College of Pharmacy, we paid our tuition. Many pharmacists are still paying for their student loans today, to be reminiscent of the fact that they paid someone to impart the information and the knowledge that they needed so that they could have a particular outcome. And I feel that coaching is very much the same way. When we say to ourselves, I've got to figure this out, I would do this, but I just don't know how. When you hire a coach, that coach can see further than you can. That coach has had experiences that they can teach you from and hopefully help you avoid making mistakes. So I actually coach pharmacists who want to build their own business. And when I'm coaching them, that is one of the most valuable lessons that I help them understand, is that if you operate your business and you understand how each piece works, then when you get to a point of needing to outsource or have a vendor take care of a particular aspect for you, you're not totally blind. And so coaching, very important. And I think it goes right along with that lesson of lifelong learning.
The lifelong learning, the coaching, and I'm also hearing that you've got to have a bit of money behind you to invest, you know, in order to pay to learn the skills. And to allow the time for business to learn the skills, put them into practice, and then for business to start coming. Or I don't know, or were you earning from months one? Was it returning your corporate income from?
No.
I see a lot of entrepreneurs that kind of just expect this money to start kind of falling from the trees.
No, there definitely has to be a period of time that you have either an income source from your job, which I actually started Your Pharmacy Advocate in 2017, and I was still working. I didn't leave my job until August of 2018. So for a period, I did have the capability of seeding the company from my earnings with work. However, I call that the training wheels. And when you get to the point where the training wheels on the bike come off, and then now you've got to balance that bike and ride speed and hopefully, you know, not lean too far to the left or the right on that bike. That I think is when you really begin to see what you're made of. You really begin to understand even more, because you have to understand how business works, how business is run, how to do business. And so I think that that's probably when my real education began, is when those proverbial training wheels came off.
Well, I've got to say, that's a pretty quick runway from 2017 to 2018 to have done that. Congratulations, Jerrica, because that's pretty quick.
Well, remember, it wasn't the runway that I chose because my health, not the fact that I had brain surgery. This was 2 years after the brain surgery, but my health was a challenge. And so just to give you insight in that wasn't necessarily a decision that I made because I wanted to. I was falling asleep while I was driving, and I knew that my life was in jeopardy, and likely someone else's life, because I don't know what was happening. And it's amazing, when I stopped working, then all of that went away. But my health was challenging me, and so I had to make that decision. If it had been up to me, I would have likely worked maybe another 2 to 3 more years, continue seeding the business and growing the business. So I think that sometimes life gives us opportunities that we would have likely wanted to plan more for. But I think that oftentimes we see what we're made of when we get that short runway like you described, because yes, that wasn't the runway that I chose to take off from.
Yeah, wow. It's just extraordinary, Jerrica. And this is the thing, it is these challenges, and particularly when life throws stuff at us that we
Yes.
that no education is necessarily going to prepare you for.
No.
But that, you know, obviously there's a spirit in you. There's a reason you're on this planet.
Yes.
And you may not be totally clear about that, you know, when these things happen, but something is driving you forward to expand and to be of service to others in a really, really profound way. And so I'm hearing you've got technical skills of business that that you've learned through coaching. And what other things, what other aspects of growth and development have you found to be things that you've needed to learn about as well?
So I would say the next biggest thing would be mindset. When I am coaching my coaching clients now, I really deal a lot with mindset. I don't think that we as humans realize how our propensity is to be very negative. Almost like when we find people that are too happy, we're like, what's wrong with them? Because as humans, I think we have more of a propensity to be negative. And so mindset is really, really key. And I love the quote by Henry Ford, where he says, if you think you can or you can't, either, like, and I'm paraphrasing, but you're right. Either way, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. And so mindset, I would say, is one of the major things that I feel helps you either make it or not in business. Because if you have a mindset, one, that's fixed with regard and not a mindset of growth. I've talked about lifelong learning. I've talked about being open to coaching and someone else being able to provide information and lessons that it's definitely worth paying for. So there are many things that your mindset, in my opinion, can either help you or hinder you. And what I've figured out is that most of us don't think about what we think about. We just think it. But when you stop and you step back and you think about what you think about and ask yourself, is that helping? Is it hurting? In the Christian faith, the scriptures say life and death is in the power of the tongue. So and it also says out of the heart the mouth will speak. So when we think about the things that we think of the things that rest on our heart and that ultimately come out of our mouth, or the things that we think that never come out of our mouth, they have the potential to shape our outcomes, if you will.
They absolutely do. Our words create our reality.
Yes.
And yeah, and so what has helped you the most to be like, as you speak today, there is such a sense of certainty, and you're very compelling in how you express yourself, and that's so like, I feel like I'm being drawn in through the screen. No, it's palpable. It's really palpable, and I just see this incredible holistic being that you have your your technical craft, and you have also then expanded and learned how to then monetize that technical knowledge in on another runway. You're creating another plane and another destination, and you're taking people with you on so many levels. You're coaching other pharmacists to become pharmacy advocates. You're creating such a high value service for both physicians and healthcare teams, let alone the patients, and the peace of mind they must get when they have you in their corner. How do you fit all this in, is my next question.
Well, I think it's very important to be realistic about what you can do with your time. And I remember when the pandemic first resulted in a shutdown here in the States, and thinking, oh, well, okay. But I've actually been busier seemingly being home, not even having my normal travel schedule of speaking. I've done quite a lot of speaking like I'm doing now through Zoom platforms. So it's like just been a shift. However, I would say that just being realistic, one, I'll tell you, Leah, I love what I do. And that's one of the big lessons as well, is loving your life. I love what I do. And if I had sent you my bio, towards the end, it says that one of my favorite scriptures is Luke 12:48, the second part of that verse, that says, to whom much is given, much is required. And I love spending my time helping people live to their potential and get the outcomes that they want for their lives and for their health and for their business, if it's pharmacists that I'm coaching. And when you love what you do, you're able to make it work. Now, yes, is it a crowded schedule? Yes, it's a busy schedule, but I love my life, and I have and continue to craft, as much as it depends on me, craft the life that I want to live. And I believe that when you love what you do, you're able to show up, to shine, to give, to bless, to encourage. And that is what I do. And I love it. So it's something that happens naturally. And I smile when I hear someone like you reflect upon it, because that's not necessarily what I'm thinking each day, but it is what I do.
And that is, people talk about find your passion and work in your passion. And as much as I haven't heard you use that word, that is, you really have brought all the corners, or all the aspects of living your passion to life.
Yes.
And that really shines through. And as we've got a couple more minutes to go in this session today, Jerrica, but what would be some parting words of advice to someone who is starting out, whether it be in pharmacy or some other science or healthcare degree, or maybe a mid-career executive looking at their options in their future, what would be some words of advice to them from what you've learned in terms of where you are now living your passion?
My advice would be to be open to dream. I really feel that even personally, when I went to pharmacy school, went to school, and you get in there and you put your head down, and it really takes a lot of tenacity and grit, and it takes all of that. But what I feel when I look back on that time is that I stopped dreaming. And then once you finish the curriculum and the didactic and academic and experiential training, you move on to go get the job. It's like, okay, now it's time to really, find my place in the world. And you feel that all you've needed was that education that you got. However, we stop dreaming. So by the time I speak with pharmacists who have been practicing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years even, and they are worn out because they are like, well, I did what I was told to do, but I don't feel fulfilled. I'm tired. And, obviously that's an entirely different conversation of the practice of pharmacy here in the United States and all of the impacts and changes that are happening. Mm-hmm. However, what I find is that when I stop that person and ask them, tell me what's in your heart. What are your dreams? They look at me as if I've turned green and I have antennas, because what do you mean dream? Like, I'm exhausted from this, these years of working that I've been doing. And I believe it's because, yes, you did have a passion for pharmacy, but somewhere the grind took over and we stopped dreaming. And so I do all of my calls and coaching by Zoom, so I can see physically what happens when you give someone the permission to dream again, and they light up and they're like, oh my gosh. And I tell them, I'm recording this, so if you want to look at yourself, you surely can, and see the change in even your facial expression and your body language when I gave you the permission to dream. Because oftentimes pharmacists will get to me and say, well, I guess I can be a consultant. And not because they're led, like I explained my story and how I ended up consulting, but it's more from a place of, well, I am a pharmacist, I have that skill, I guess I can do that. Not because it's what they're passionate about, not because it's what they dream of doing. And so if I could say one lesson that's really, really important, it would be to dream. And I mentioned to you before that one of my dreams was to create my own platform.
Wow.
And I developed a magazine, or I published now a magazine called Pharmacist magazine. And it was out of coaching women pharmacists. I wanted to build a platform to tell their stories. I'm not the only woman who's living a life that I dream of. There are other women as well. And so that is how I built that. I knew nothing about publishing a magazine, but I was confident enough to know that if I asked the question, that even if I didn't have the answer, someone I knew either knew someone or knew the answer. And so that is how this magazine came about. And that's why I tell my coaching clients, don't tell me what's not possible, because I didn't come from a family that published publications or anything like that. I said, I dream of doing this. Who do I need to know so that I can make that happen? And we are now planning for the 3rd publication.
Oh, congratulations. Oh my goodness. It just keeps coming, doesn't it? And isn't that, when you're in flow, don't you? But I'm also hearing, Jerrica, and this is where one of your unique superpowers too, is that you will ask for help.
Yes.
And that you matter, like
Yes.
your need matters. That screams through the screen for me. And we absolutely need so many more of you, and on stages and on screens, like being the role model for others to see, hey, I really can be the best version of me, and find my dream and make my dream happen. And you are demonstrating that through and through. So how do people best get in contact with you, Jerrica, either to learn more about you or to get your magazine, or, you know, tell us where are you best contacted?
So the best way to contact me directly, I hang out quite a bit on LinkedIn. And so many of my contacts come through LinkedIn, where people will just send me a message or send me a connection request.
Yep.
If someone wanted to see my personal website, they definitely could at drjerricadodd.com. So it's DrJerricaDodd, drjerricadodd.com. The magazine website is Pharmacist, S-I-S, mag for magazine.com.
That is such a cool name. That is so cool.
Thank
you.
Definitely.
So sales, marketing, business, branding. So were these scary for you in the beginning, or was it another new adventure? Like
both.
Yeah.
It was scary because I did not come from an environment where I was used to having to promote myself. I thought, well, that surely doesn't feel comfortable. But what I understand is that when you share yourself with the world, then, and you share your gifts with the world, it, like I mentioned earlier, it gives people the license or the permission that they seem to feel they need to share their gifts. And I believe that it's also a scary notion. So that first magazine, I was before it published. But now, as I tell people, when I look at the cover of the magazine, because I see them every day here on my desk, it's not necessarily a glitz and glamour type feeling. I see a woman who, as I said, my runway was a lot shorter than I would have planned, but I see on the cover of that magazine, I see a woman who trusted God and bet on herself.
Yeah, let's see that cover again.
Just sure. So here, there are two of them.
Stunning. Absolutely stunning. So just, so put them up so we can still see your face.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I take a screenshot?
Sure.
That is so cool. That is so gorgeous. Thank you, Jerrica, for joining us today. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we've really just scratched the surface, but there are so many, there's so much great role modeling that you've shared with us today. And I really look forward to seeing the next chapter in Dr. Jerrica Dodd and all the wonderful work that you are doing as a pharmacy advocate, and for patients, for doctors, for the world. And I really appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.